Iran's president has vowed to take action against protesters after more than a week of anti-government demonstrations, 10 days in fact. President Ebrahim Raisi pledged to deal decisively with the protests, which have now spread to most of Iran's 31 provinces. At least 41 demonstrators and security services officers have been killed since the protests broke out over the death of Mahsa Amini in police custody. Our chief correspondent John Cookson has the story.
Iranians have taken to the streets for a 10th consecutive night to protest against the death of Mahsa Amini. Iran's largest protests in almost 3 years have seen security forces fire live rounds, while protesters have hurled rocks, torched police cars and set fire to state buildings. Officially, at least 41 people have died since the unrest began, most of them protesters, but also members of Iran's security forces have lost their lives. 22-year-old Mahsa was detained by Iran's morality police for allegedly not properly wearing a head covering, the hijab. The headscarf has been compulsory for women in Iran since the 1979 Islamic Revolution, and members of the morality police enforce the strict dress code. These are the last known images of her in custody, where Iranian authorities claim she'd had a heart attack. Her family says she had no history of heart disease. A cousin, Efo Montazei, says, Mahsa is the voice of the anger of the Iranian people right now. Mahsa has sparked this anger because when she died, the Islamic Republic tried to bury her secretly at night without anyone knowing. Fortunately, the people in her hometown of Sarkez prevented this plot and didn't allow this. Mahsa's death has sparked protests outside Iran, calling for an end to the Islamic regime in Tehran. This was Paris. This human rights activist said, "Today is not just about Mahsa, it's also to show our hatred of the Islamic Republic." Angry scenes too outside the Iranian embassy in London. This location has seen many protests over the years. Several hundred Iranian exiles clashed with police and brought traffic to a standstill. A number of arrests were made and 11 police officers were injured in the confrontation. And fury too across the Atlantic, where demonstrators in Atlanta brought streets to a standstill. A growing anger which is resonating across the world. John Cookson, Arise News.
And John Cookson joins us now for more. Good to see you, John. So the defiance of these Iranian protesters as strong as ever, taking to the streets for the 10th consecutive night, despite intimidation and violence by security forces. What's the latest update?
Hi, Charles. Good to see you. Well, the latest update is that the cities across Iran appear to be quieter tonight, but we'll have to wait and see what happens tonight and in the coming days, because there is genuine anger across Iran, and as you saw in my report, in capitals elsewhere in the world, at this young woman's death in custody in what very suspicious circumstances. She was Kurdish from a town about 500 kilometers northwest of Tehran, an area where Kurds are persecuted on a daily basis by the regime in Tehran. It's a region of great unrest, a region of great unemployment, and I've reported journalistically from there on both sides of the border, which goes into Iraq, and met with Kurds who've crossed over from Iran into Iraqi Kurdistan, and they tell of their terrible lives where there are few jobs, where drug taking is rife. I'm told that's encouraged by the regime in Tehran as a way of keeping the population inert, as it were, and they have a really difficult time. Now, what she was doing in Tehran, we don't know. Her cousin said that he thought she was shopping with her brother, but there's no confirmation of that. She may well be one of the hundreds of thousands of young Kurds who have no employment in northwest of Iran and are forced to go to live in cities like Tehran and elsewhere in Shiraz, Isfahan, Bandar Abbas, where they can actually find work. The cousin's been telling of her last hours, and she was shopping with her brother, according to the cousin, when they came across the morality police. Now, the morality police are most likely to be women fanatics of the Islamic Revolution. I've seen them in action on the streets of Tehran, and they're very, very strict indeed, and often they carry whips to coerce people, and often women, into getting dressed properly. In other words, pulling the headscarf right down to the forehead. Interestingly, in the picture that I used of Miss Amini, I saw that the headscarf was well back, and for sure the morality police would take great exception to a showing of hair to that degree. So, to answer your question, quieter tonight, Charles, but the tensions are still there.
And John, just briefly, that there are rumours that the ruling Ayatollah in Iran doesn't appear to have long to live. I mean, what are you hearing about that? And is it possibly a tipping point?
Yeah, there have been stories about that quite often over the years. He suffers from cancer of the prostate, and he's been on his deathbed a number of times, but in recent weeks, the stories have got stronger and stronger. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who we're talking about here, is 83 years old, Charles, and he may well be coming to the end of his life. Will that make a big difference? Probably not in terms of the Islamic Revolution's continuance, and the source, of course, was Ayatollah Khomeini back in 1979. The clerics, 88-member clerical group, which chooses the next spiritual leader, will already have someone in mind and could include Ali Khamenei's son. So reports that he's seriously ill have been growing stronger in recent days and weeks, but the regime in Tehran saying very little about this at the moment.
Thank you, John. So as the protests continue in Iran amid fears of a tougher clampdown, I wonder what the next chapter will be. John Cookson, Arise chief correspondent, talking to me there about developments in Iran.